Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Comment where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. Nights in the hospital always carried a distinct smell. Antiseptic mingling with the chill of the air conditioning, sometimes pierced by the faint wail of an ambulance siren in the distance. Emily Carter had grown used to that atmosphere during her 3 years as an ER nurse. But tonight, her body felt more drained than usual. A 16-hour shift had left her eyelids heavy, her hands trembling each time she jotted down notes in a patient's chart. She was just about to lean back for a few minutes' rest when the ER doors flew open. 2 men in black suits rushed in, supporting a tall man whose white shirt was drenched in blood. "Oh my God!" Emily gasped, her heart tightening. The man lifted his head. For a split second, as the neon light swept across his face, Emily met a pair of cold gray eyes, sharp and commanding enough to send a shiver through her. Unlike ordinary patients who pleaded for life, his gaze was arrogant, issuing orders rather than begging. "He's losing a lot of blood," Emily shouted, yanking a gurney over. "Lay him down now." The 2 bodyguards obeyed awkwardly, then quickly slipped out, leaving the room with only Emily and the stranger. Blood soaked her gloves as she carefully cut away the outer shirt. A deep slash ran along his rib cage, sharp and clean from a blade. Emily bit her lip, forcing herself to stay calm. Her mind swarmed with questions. Why would someone be wandering at night in this condition? Who had done this to him? And for what reason? "Were you just in an accident?" she asked as she disinfected the wound. The man didn't answer. His chiseled face remained cold as stone, only twitching slightly when the alcohol burned raw flesh. Emily's irritation flared. She was far too exhausted to deal with a silent patient. "You know, you're lucky I hadn't gone home yet. Otherwise, you'd probably be dead by now." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips, icy, yet carrying the weight of a sigh. "I don't die that easily." "Yeah, well, your blood is still pouring out like a waterfall," Emily snapped back, her hands swiftly stitching each line. Every stitch felt like a needle into her own heart, not from fatigue, but from the strange mix of worry for this man and anger at his reckless disregard for life. The air grew thick, broken only by the snip of thread and his heavy breathing. Emily realized his silence wasn't empty at all. It was like a fortress he had built around himself, a wall that held secrets, danger, and loneliness. At last, when she finished bandaging the wound, Emily looked up, ready to scold him again. But his eyes stopped her. They no longer glinted with ice. There was instead a fleeting weariness that cut down to the bone. Her voice softened. "You need to stay for observation. If there's an infection..." "No need." He cut her off, rising with a terrifying calm, as though the injury were nothing more than a scratch. His hand trembled faintly as it held the blood-stained jacket, but his eyes remained proud. Emily blocked him. "Where are you going?" "That wound..." He leaned in, close enough that Emily caught the faint trace of cologne mixed with the metallic tang of blood. His voice was low, gravelly, each word dropping like a warning. "You shouldn't get involved with me." Then he turned, walking away, leaving a faint trail of blood across the stark white floor. The door closed behind him. Emily stood frozen, her hands still shaking, her heart racing wildly. His words echoed in her mind. A mysterious man, a wound soaked in blood, eyes like an abyss, and a chilling warning. She told herself, "I'll never see him again." But some vague instinct whispered to Emily that this was only the beginning of a storm far greater than she could imagine. The morning after a shift that felt endless, all Emily wanted was a dreamless sleep. She pulled back the curtains, letting pale sunlight spill into her small apartment. The kettle whistled, the smell of coffee rose, and everything seemed ordinary, until the roar of engines from the street seeped in through every crack. She stepped out onto the balcony with her mug in hand. The quiet street of her old neighborhood had turned into a makeshift military parking lot. 3 glossy black SUVs lined the curb. A van blocked the entrance, and men in suits with earpieces stood in a semicircle around the building. One was sketching on the hood of a car. 2 others scanned the rooftops as if expecting snipers. Her coffee nearly slipped from her hand. "No way!" Neighbors began to peek out. The elderly woman downstairs clutched her fluffy cat and shouted up, "Filming a movie, dear?" Three kids across the street pressed their faces to the window, eyes shining. A middle-aged man kicked his tire, muttering, "Perfect. Morning traffic already, and now the road's blocked." The doorbell rang insistently. Emily threw on a cardigan and opened the door. A man stood straight as a post, mid-30s, suit buttoned with precision, clean-shaven, dark eyes, calm. He gave a slight nod and handed her a business card. "Good morning, Miss Carter. I'm Marcus Hale, private security detail. We're here to protect our boss's savior." A prickling sensation crawled down Emily's spine. "Savior of who?" Marcus looked at her, his voice measured. "Last night, you saved our boss from a serious wound. We reviewed the hospital cameras. There's reason to believe his enemies saw you." "Enemies?" Emily choked. She blinked, catching sight of four more men setting up what looked like a checkpoint at the end of the hall. Her hand tightened on the doorknob. "Do you people think I'm the heroine of some action movie?" Marcus's expression didn't change. "Not a movie. Minimal protocol." "Your minimal protocol includes what exactly? Ruining the entire block's morning? Jamming up the mail truck? Scaring my downstairs neighbor into a heart attack?" "The mailman has been cleared." "No explosives," Marcus said seriously. "And we gave the lady a new cat carrier as an apology." "Oh, for crying out loud." Emily pressed her forehead against the doorframe. Through her fingers, she saw one guard holding up a pink cat carrier, apologizing profusely to the old woman. Another lugged a huge paper bag labeled bread, 50 loaves having taken supplies literally. "No one comes into my apartment," Emily said slowly. "No following me into the bathroom. No lurking outside my windows. No machine scanning. Whatever. This is my home." Marcus nodded. "We'll keep the perimeter only. Still, you shouldn't leave until further orders." "Orders from who?" Emily lifted her chin. "That mysterious boss of yours?" Silence. Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if listening to someone through his earpiece, then lowered his voice. "I understand the inconvenience. But last night there was an incident. We can't risk it. You were seen at the ER. If anyone thinks you matter, they might—" "That's enough." Emily cut him off. Deep down, fear sprouted quietly, like the ground shifting beneath her feet. "I'm a nurse. I save people. I don't want to be tangled in enemies, bosses, security, or any of your quotation marks." Her phone chimed, unknown number, a message with just 2 sentences. "Sorry for the noise. I'll take responsibility. Signed, AC." Emily's heart skipped. AC. The gray eyes from last night, the faint cologne mixed with blood, the razor-sharp warning, "You shouldn't get involved with me." Pieces collided in her head, sparking. She typed back before she could think. "I don't need a Hollywood film crew outside my house. Send them away. Now." The typing dots appeared, then vanished. A long pause. Finally a reply. "I can't. Just today. Don't go outside." "Miss Carter?" Marcus's voice broke the silence, polite but firm. "We'll cut down numbers and clear the road. But please stay inside until noon. If you need anything, call this number." He handed her another sheet, hotline contacts, one labeled groceries supply team. "Supply team?" Emily glanced at the 50-loaf bread bag inside. "Fine. 3 conditions. 1, no aiming things at my neighbors. 2, don't block the garbage truck. 3, don't call me a target or asset. I'm a human being." "Understood." Marcus noted it down in a real notebook, as if documenting a peace treaty. "We'll switch terminology to medical client, and—" He hesitated a beat. "Sorry for frightening you." The door shut again. Emily leaned against the wall, listening as the hallway slowly quieted. She looked around her tiny kitchen, the basil growing in a tin can, the porcelain teacups her mom found at a flea market. The ordinary things suddenly felt fragile against the steady footsteps outside. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call, unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A low, husky voice, muffled as though through tape. "Are you all right?" Emily's spine snapped straight. You're the man from last night? Silence. On the other end, she caught the sound of a door opening, wind rushing over the microphone. Then his voice dropped, steady and raw. Don't be afraid. I won't let anyone touch you. Who are you? Emily pressed. Who are you really? More silence. When he spoke again, it wasn't a name. I owe you a life. You don't owe me anything. I was doing my job. She bit her lip. But that life of yours is trampling all over mine. A quiet exhale. I'll fix it. Just today. The call ended. Emily stared at the black screen, helpless. There was something in his voice. Not just command, but a scar of exhaustion. The same as last night. And she hated that her heart understood. Noise surged again outside. She pulled the curtain aside. The security team looked less like an invasion now. 3 men at the corners, the van gone. A local cop approached Marcus. Marcus showed him papers. The officer nodded, then asked for a photo with the old woman's cat. Emily burst out laughing, startled by the sound of it in her own throat. A text from Grace, her best friend, popped up like salvation. Is there a Netflix shoot at your house? Attached was a picture from the street. Emily in her oversized sweater on the balcony, with 3 black dots below like punctuation marks stamped on the road. Not Netflix. A nightmare in suits, Emily replied. Grace sent a string of laughing emojis. Come on, if their boss is hot, don't chase them off. Not funny, Emily typed. I'm scared, really scared. The cursor blinked. Then Grace's message came. Want to stay at my place? Emily glanced outside. As if sensing her thought, Marcus looked up toward the balcony. Number. She couldn't just stay somewhere else when the net outside was wide enough to smother her entire life overnight. She opened the door again. Marcus turned instantly. I have a few ground rules. Emily drew a deep breath. 1, if you knock, knock softly. 2, no eavesdropping. 3, if deja vu strikes and you want to supply me again, she pointed at the bread bag. 2 loaves, not 50. The corner of Marcus's mouth twitched, faint as pencil lead. Understood. 2 loaves. And, Emily added, voice softening, if someone really dangerous comes, what will you do? Stop them before they get close. Marcus met her eyes. No one steps across your door. That's my promise. And my boss's. Your boss, Emily repeated, the metallic taste of last night back in her throat. What kind of man is he? Marcus paused so briefly it almost went unnoticed. A man who pays his debts and doesn't let his people get hurt. The door shut once more. On the mat lay a small package wrapped in brown craft paper. Inside, sterile medical bandages, chamomile tea, and a handwritten note in neat, sharp script. Sorry for the noise. I hope you can get some rest. Emily stood there for a long time, the thin paper trembling in her hand, listening as the street quieted, her heart slowing, then racing again for another reason. She wanted her ordinary life back, but ordinary had slipped from her grasp the moment those gray eyes met hers under the hospital lights. Outside, suited men rotated shifts, movement steady as clockwork. Overhead, the sun slowly pushed light into every corner of the room. Emily closed the curtains, leaned against the door, and finally admitted to herself. The storm had arrived, and it brought an army. She lifted the chamomile tea, sank into a chair, trying to coax herself into sleep. Just before her eyes closed, her phone buzzed once more. The final message of the morning, I will come to apologize in person this afternoon. Emily stared at the 3 letters, a feeling dropping and rippling inside her, like a pebble striking water. Circles spread outward, touching things she couldn't yet name. She turned off the screen. Don't come, she whispered, though no one could hear. Yet deep down she knew. He would, and the next chapter of this storm would open right at her doorstep. That morning, before sunlight had even spilled past Emily's curtains, the small neighborhood was already unusually noisy. People clustered in groups, whispering and pointing, all eyes fixed on one place, her house. Dozens of men in black suits, earpieces clipped in, stood in a strict formation on her porch like a presidential security detail. Emily woke to the commotion, half convinced that a movie crew had arrived to film an action scene. She threw on a coat in a panic and rushed outside. "What on earth is going on?" she blurted, her hair messy, her voice still hoarse from sleep. A neighbor tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Word is, some powerful guy sent them to protect you." "Emily, are you in debt to the mob?" "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Emily groaned, a vein throbbing at her temple. She hadn't even managed to explain before a sleek black luxury car rolled up to the gate. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a navy suit, a silver-striped tie, polished shoes gleaming in the sun. Emily froze. It was the same injured neighbor from last night, but instead of torn shirts and blood stains, he now looked like a figure carved out of power itself, straight from the pages of a business magazine. The crowd hushed, only the sound of wind rustling through the trees filling the silence. "Alexander Cole." Someone murmured his name, and the whispers swelled instantly. "Cole? As in Cole Holdings?" "The finance mogul. He owns half the city." Emily stood rooted to the spot, mouth agape. You're who?" she stammered. Alexander walked toward her, each step shrinking the space between them. When he stopped in front of her, he slid off his sunglasses, revealing cold, steel-gray eyes that seemed endless. "Sorry for keeping it from you," he said in a low, steady voice. "I'm Alexander Cole. And the moment you stitched me up last night, you stepped into my world." Emily frowned, still reeling. "Your world? You mean stocks? Land auctions? Sounds dangerous." Alexander met her gaze. "More dangerous than you think. In my world, every deal can be paid for in blood. I have enemies. And now, because you saved me, they'll come after you." Emily narrowed her eyes, stifling a laugh. "Terrifying. So tell me, how much do you owe the bank that you need an army of bodyguards camped outside my house?" A few guards chuckled under their breath, but quickly stopped when Alexander's gaze swept over them. His lips curved slightly. Was it anger or resignation? She couldn't tell. "You still think this is a joke?" he asked, his voice lower now, tinged with fatigue. Emily crossed her arms at her waist, planting her stance, utterly unfazed by the intimidating entourage. "All I know is that I stayed up all night, stitched up a mysterious neighbor, and woke up to find my house surrounded like an action movie set, only to learn that said neighbor is the city's most notorious tycoon. You expect me to just believe that?" Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, part surprise, part intrigue. No one in the financial world had ever dared speak to him that way, but Emily was different. She wasn't afraid. She mocked him. He leaned down, his breath brushing her ear. "I don't expect you to believe me right away. But the truth is, I have to keep you safe. It's not a choice. It's my duty." Emily looked up, her wide eyes glimmering with the morning light. She was about to retort, but his gaze stopped her cold. It wasn't just icy command. It carried a trace of worry. Something in her chest rippled unexpectedly. The crowd of neighbors still gawked and whispered. Emily hastily pulled him inside, away from prying eyes. Once the door shut, she pressed her hands against the table and exhaled. "I never imagined I'd be involved with a finance mogul. This is insane." Alexander loosened his tie, sank into her sofa, and closed his eyes briefly. "You can think that. But insane or not, I won't let anyone hurt you." Emily stared at him, her thoughts tangled like threads. Her mind screamed that this was nothing but a nightmare, that tomorrow everything would go back to normal. But her heart whispered that the moment she bandaged his wound last night, her quiet life had changed forever. She sighed, shaking her head. "Your world and mine are worlds apart. I don't believe I can stand in it." Alexander opened his eyes, his gaze sharp yet steady. "That's why I'll stand with you." Rumors spread faster than any fire. Just days after the siege at Emily's house, the financial world buzzed with whispers. Cole has a secret girlfriend, a regular nurse. And those whispers didn't stay confined to luxurious boardrooms. They reached the ears of Ethan Ward, Alexander's greatest rival. Ward didn't believe in coincidences. To him, anyone who appeared beside Alexander Cole could become a pawn on the chessboard. And Emily Carter, with her ordinary background, was the easiest weakness to exploit. Emily noticed it first. On her way to work, she spotted a stranger tailing her, a man in a wrinkled shirt pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes never left her. At the hospital, someone in a baseball cap sat in the waiting room for hours without ever seeking treatment. Her chest tightened, the very air around her seeming to suffocate. One evening, when she returned to her apartment, Alexander was already waiting at the door. "Someone's investigating you," he said bluntly. "It's Ward. He wants to use you to pressure me." Emily threw her bag onto a chair, exasperated. "I told you from the start. I just wanted a normal life, but you dragged me into your world. So what now?" Alexander's gray eyes didn't waver. "I'm sorry, but there's no turning back now. If I don't want you to become a target, I need to make something public." Emily folded her arms. "And what would that be?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You'll become my girlfriend. In name." For a moment, Emily thought she had misheard. Then she let out a bitter laugh. "Girlfriend? Ridiculous. You think just saying that will make Ward leave me alone?" "At the very least, it'll make him hesitate," Alexander replied, his eyes burning with conviction. "To a man like Ward, the women in my life are untouchable territory. If he dares, it's a direct challenge to me." Emily reeled. "You're talking like I'm your human shield." "No." Alexander shook his head. "You're the only one who's ever saved me without asking for anything. You deserve to be protected, even if this is the cost." Emily turned away, her heartbeat stumbling. She wanted to argue, to scream, but deep inside, some fragile part of her trembled at his words. The next day, Emily still went to the hospital. But this time, when she stepped out after a night shift, she walked straight into chaos. Several paparazzi stood waiting, cameras raised. One lunged forward, thrusting out a recorder. "Are you Alexander Cole's new girlfriend? Where did you meet him? How does an ordinary nurse catch the eye of a financial tycoon?" Emily's face went pale, her chest constricting. She tried to back away, to slip past, but the crowd pressed in tighter. Just then, a black car pulled up. The door opened, and Alexander stepped out. Dark suit, steady stride, eyes cold as a blade. For a few seconds, the reporters fell silent. He walked straight to Emily, not a flicker of hesitation. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her firmly against him, shielding her from the onslaught of lenses. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but cutting. "She's my girlfriend. And," he turned to the cameras, gray eyes flashing like tempered steel, "touch her, and you touch me." The air froze. The reporters swallowed hard, none daring to take another step. A few shutters still clicked, but their hands trembled under the weight of invisible pressure. Emily was stunned. Heat rushed through her body, her heart racing wildly. She wanted to shove him away, to scream for dragging her into this performance, but at the same time, the warmth of his arm around her, the thundering of his heartbeat so close, it stole her words away. Only once the car carried them off did she erupt. "You've lost your mind, in front of everyone. You said I was your girlfriend." Alexander leaned back, his gaze never leaving hers. "Did you see how they didn't dare touch you anymore?" "That's why." Emily bit her lip, shaking with fury. "You turned me into a piece in your power game." "No," Alexander said, leaning closer, his hand brushing hers, making her flinch. "I just want you safe. And sometimes, safety requires a declaration." Emily turned to the window, hiding her flushed face. She was still angry, but deep down his words, "Touch her, and you touch me," echoed in her mind, making her heart stumble. The next morning, Emily started her early shift. She had thought this 2-week pretend girlfriend arrangement would be nothing more than an invisible shield. But no, Alexander Cole was present in every breath she took, and today he appeared right at the entrance of the ER. No bodyguards, no gleaming black car, just a man in a charcoal shirt and long coat, standing straight among the waiting patients like he belonged. But he didn't belong. Curious eyes from patients, nurses, and doctors swept over him again and again. The morning light hit the bridge of his nose, making him stand out like a spotlight. Emily tried to pretend she hadn't noticed, but he had already caught her eye. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and smooth. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, weaving past patients to reach him. This is a hospital, not a press conference. You told me not to interfere with your work. He lifted both hands slightly, face calm. But I do have a checkup for my wound. And his voice dropped as he leaned in, his breath brushing her ear. It's also my chance to see you without cameras lurking. Emily's cheeks burned. She spun away. Sit down. Don't draw attention. But how could he not draw attention? Alexander Cole filled out medical forms as though he were signing a multi-million-dollar contract. In the box for marital status, he scrawled 2 words. Taken. Emily snatched the paper from him. What are you doing? This isn't a joke. Not joking, he replied, lips curving slightly. Just being honest with the situation. Emily ground her teeth. If you don't cooperate, I'll let the blood pressure cuff pinch your arm till it bursts. For some reason, the threat made him laugh softly. A rare sound, fleeting, but enough to make a few nurses stop and stare. Emily wished the floor would swallow her whole. That evening, the roles reversed. This time, it wasn't Emily dragging Alexander. It was him taking her. Just a small party. Show up with me for a few minutes, then you can leave, he said as the limousine stopped in front of the city's grandest hotel. Small? Emily gaped through the window. Red carpet, flashing cameras, gowns glittering like silver waves. You think this looks like a corner cafe? He turned, gray eyes sharp yet soothing. Don't worry. I'm here. And then he held out his hand. Emily didn't want to take it, but if she didn't, she'd stumble in the borrowed heels Grace had lent her. So she placed her hand in his, the sensation like gripping a live wire, dangerous, impossible to let go. Inside, chandeliers shattered light into 1,000 fragments. Violins swelled. The air was heavy with perfume and the scent of wine-soaked laughter. And suddenly, Emily was the center of attention. Not because she wanted to be, but because every gaze was on Alexander Cole. And beside him was her. Miss Carter. The greeting came from a middle-aged businessman, then another, then a cluster of them. They bowed slightly, extended hands, and smiled at her as if she were already an indispensable piece of this glittering world. Emily froze. Miss Carter. She had never been called that, at least not with such formality, respect, even caution. At the hospital, she was Nurse Emily. Carter on the night shift. Emily, grab more gauze. Here she was suddenly the potential lady of an empire. Alexander moved effortlessly through it all, as though he had lived his whole life for such greetings. His hand rested lightly on her back, guiding her through the crowd. Every touch was a wordless reminder. Keep walking, I'm here. Emily wanted to vanish. She forced polite smiles, nodding at compliments, her head spinning. A young businesswoman admired her dress. Emily almost blurted, Thanks, my friend lent it to me. Amid the blur, she noticed a stare. Across the room, a stranger with cold eyes held a glass loosely, watching them. Alexander saw him too, just a glance, but his hand tightened against her back. And Emily felt it, the collision of 2 worlds. Her white nurse's coat and his black tailored suit had slammed together, leaving a crack that couldn't easily be mended. She didn't belong here, yet he was walking her through it, as if this path were inevitable. When the party finally ended, Emily exhaled like someone escaping a stage play. On the drive back, she couldn't hold it in. See? I was completely lost in there. I'm just a nurse. I don't know how to smile like them, how to toast the right way. You were yourself, Alexander cut her off, his voice as firm as steel but his eyes strangely warm. That's what makes you different. They bowed because you stood beside me, but He paused, his tone softening. I bow because you dared to walk in there even though you were afraid. Emily went quiet. Her chest swelled with something sharp and sweet, unnameable. She wanted to deny it, to insist this was all pretend. But somewhere deep inside, a part of her already believed him. Outside, the city drifted by in golden light, like a river of stars flowing backward. Inside the car, 2 worlds, hospital and ballroom, white coat and black suit, had collided, sparking the first flames of a coming storm. After the dazzling night that felt more like a stage play than a party, Emily returned to the harsh neon glare of the hospital. Here, the scent of antiseptic drowned out every luxury perfume, and the cries of children cut deeper than any round of applause. She reminded herself the 2-week pretend girlfriend arrangement was only a circle drawn around the edges. At the center, her work, the children, unexplained fevers, those wide innocent eyes was still hers. That morning, the pediatric ward received an unexpected shipment: 2 new ventilators, 3 automatic syringe pumps, and a brand new multi-parameter monitor. The technicians, unboxing them, gasped like kids discovering new toys. "This wasn't in this year's budget," the head nurse muttered, both relieved and uneasy. "Who approved this?" "No one," the warehouse staff chuckled, holding out an invoice stamped, "Paid in full, anonymous donor." In the corner, a small handwritten note whispered, "Don't put up a plaque. If you want to thank me, let the night shift have 10 minutes for tea." Emily froze. Just a streak of ink, but the picture in her mind clicked together. The chamomile tea left at her door, the clipped apologies, the definitive punctuation. She didn't need a signature. She had heard that voice long enough to recognize its traces in silence. At noon, Dr. Patel held a quick meeting in the break room. "Good news," he said, pushing up his glasses, voice rough from lack of sleep. "The NICU has been upgraded. And we've got a small fund for toys in the waiting room." He hesitated, glancing around before lowering his voice. "From someone who doesn't want their name attached." When the room emptied, Emily poured him some water. "Doctor, who do you think did this?" Dr. Patel smiled wearily. "For those who've gone far enough, the name doesn't matter as much as the way they leave." He winked. "But if you see them, tell them Nurse Emily Carter's night shift absolutely deserves 10 minutes for tea." Emily blushed, hiding her smile behind a plastic cup. She neither denied nor admitted, just warmth spreading through her chest, like walking in the rain and suddenly finding an umbrella overhead, without asking. That afternoon, Emily administered medication to a 4-year-old boy named Noah, whose hair was cropped short and who was clutching a plastic green dinosaur. He frowned at the needle, wincing as it touched his skin. Emily blew gently on his hand, telling him the dinosaur was brave enough to sleep without fear of the dark. "Dinosaurs don't sleep," Noah insisted through baby teeth, blinking fast to fight back tears. "Oh? Then what do they do at night?" "They go on patrol," he answered gravely. Emily chuckled, finished bandaging, then straightened, only to be caught by a sweep of light across the floor. She looked up. On the ceiling, tiny stars twirled slowly, blue and purple specks drifting down the walls like meteor showers. The children in the waiting room gasped in chorus. She stepped into the hall. Marcus stood beside a giant cardboard box labeled Galaxy Projector. He scratched his ear, looking unusually sheepish. "Bit oversized," he remarked. Emily put her hands on her hips. "You planning to build an entire Milky Way in pediatrics?" "Originally, the boss picked the smaller version," Marcus said in a low voice, like sharing a secret. "But the sales clerk said the Pro was prettier." "The boss?" she asked, though she already knew. "The man who pays his debts," he answered without blinking. Emily looked back at the stars rolling over the walls, the children craning their necks, parents snapping pictures as their kids finally stopped crying. A whole universe inside one small room. She pressed her lips together, swallowing her thanks. She had made a rule. Don't let him spill into her work, but light draws circles you can't control. She typed a message, after deleting it several times. "The ventilators work perfectly. Thanks for the sky." Then sent. Dots appeared, then vanished, as if the man on the other side weighed each word. Finally, chamomile tea at 10 p.m. Don't forget the 10 minutes. Emily burst out laughing softly, tucking her phone away. Her heart didn't flutter like in soap operas. It simply shifted a beat, slowing then quickening, like a runner stumbling on a sudden slope. Night fell, and the hospital quieted. The rattle of stainless steel wheels down shiny floors became the metronome of the shift. Emily walked the ward, hands clasped behind her back. Noah slept hugging his dinosaur, fever cooling. In the waiting area, the artificial sky glimmered, stars working silently, making people forget, for a moment, they were in a hospital. Close to 10 p.m., the head nurse rolled a small tray into the break room. Chamomile tea, butter cookies, and a note. 10 minutes. Orders from the benefactor. A smiley face scribbled at the end. Emily hesitated, then carried the tray down to a quiet corner in the first-floor lobby. She set it on the table, leaned back. The overhead yellow light softened everything. Fatigue draped over her like a heavy blanket. 10 minutes, and she whispered, closing her eyes. She didn't know when she drifted off, only that when she woke, a blanket covered her shoulders. It was a thin gray blanket, smelling of night air mixed with a familiar trace. Clean, deep, faint but persistent. Across from her, Alexander sat, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the revolving doors. His coat was still on, his tie gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, just as they had been that morning. His face was less rigid. Beside him rested a small paper bag, the edge of a box of bandages peeking out. "When did you get here?" Emily pulled the blanket tighter, propping herself up, her voice unable to hide its fluster. "Just before you fell asleep," he murmured. "Marcus is outside. I didn't enter staff areas." He dipped his head slightly, as though needing to mark the boundary. "I only put the blanket on." "Exactly 10 minutes, she noted, glancing at the clock. "Impressive timing." "I asked security to warn me when time was nearly up," he said, the faintest smile crossing his lips. "Don't tell the head nurse." Emily let out a soft laugh. Then silence settled again. The night lobby was tame as a cat fed well. The automatic doors opened and closed soundlessly. The clock ticked in drops. In that hush, she found herself watching him longer than usual. No chandeliers, no red carpets, no businessmen bowing. Just a man sitting quietly, back straight by habit, eyes locked on doors by another habit, the habit of waiting. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "The donations, the machines, the stars, even the blanket." "There are things I can't not do," he replied. "Not because I'm good, but because I know what it's like to wait for a door that never opens. I hate that feeling." "You've waited before?" The question slipped out and hung between them. He looked down at his hands. Clean, unscarred knuckles. But she remembered the faint scar under his eye, the pale line on his cheekbone. "I have," he said. Then he raised his gaze. Gray eyes, no longer cold, only deeper. "And when I can, I want to keep someone else from waiting." Emily wasn't one to melt over pretty words. Her job had taught her to distinguish between comfort and a bandage. But tonight, his actions, the things without plaques, ribbons, or cameras, spoke louder than he did. She felt herself soften in the very place she thought unbreakable. "The chamomile's cold now," she said, trying to steady her voice. "Cold tea doesn't change its effect." He shrugged, mimicking her own nonchalant tone. 10 minutes is 10 minutes. She nodded, lifting the cup. "Thank you for everything, even though I told you not to spill into my work." "I stayed outside the door," he answered. "Sometimes I only hand over a blanket." They both laughed. The sound fell onto the tiled floor and dissolved like steam. Before standing, Emily pulled off the blanket to return it, but Alexander laid a hand on the edge, holding it a moment. His eyes sought hers. For the first time since they met, there was no command, no strategy, no my world, only a wordless question. "Sleep a little longer," he said softly, as if afraid of waking someone else in the night. "I'm here." 2 simple words, "I'm here," fell gently but struck deep. Emily nodded, leaned back, eyes drifting shut. Through her lashes, she still caught his outline fading and sharpening with her breath. Beyond, the artificial stars spun, scattering threads of light across the floor. Her heart didn't change direction overnight. It only shifted a millimeter toward the man sitting there. But sometimes a millimeter is enough for one straight line to split into 2 distinct lines. And Emily knew, from the moment the blanket touched her shoulders, something between them had quietly moved. No trumpets, no fanfare, just a small act only the 2 of them would remember. As she slipped into sleep, Alexander stayed still, eyes fixed on the revolving doors as always. But his gaze had changed, less steel, more of something unspoken. If anyone stood close, they might have felt the rarest air around him, not power, not wealth, but the tenderness of a man who, for the first time, feared breaking a heart other than his own. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands are listening and sharing together. Rain pounded hard that evening, each drop drumming relentlessly against the glass walls of the 40th floor office at Cole Holdings. Alexander stood before the massive window, his gray eyes sweeping over the city glowing beneath him like a giant chessboard. But tonight, that chessboard wasn't still. The phone in his hand had rung 3 times already, always with the same unfamiliar, steel-cold voice. If you want to see her again, bring the contract. The Riverside property must belong to Ward. Emily had vanished right after her afternoon shift. She was supposed to meet Grace for dinner, but never made it to the restaurant. When Marcus reported the news, Alexander felt as though an iron hand had closed around his chest. This wasn't the first time the real estate mogul had faced threats, but it was the first time anyone dared touch the circle he had drawn around someone he swore to protect. Marcus set the recorder on the desk. They used a burner phone, but in the background, train horns, likely near the old docks. Alexander didn't respond. His fingers tapped slowly against the glass, his eyes fixed on the city lights beyond. Ward, you've gone too far. Emily woke in the dimness of an abandoned warehouse. The air reeked of damp wood and rusted metal. Her wrists were bound behind her, her mouth uncovered, the only sound a steady drip from a leaking roof. The iron door screeched open. A narrow-faced man stepped inside, his smile as sharp as a blade. Miss Carter. His voice was sickly sweet. Apologies for the inconvenience. We only want a little cooperation from your boyfriend. Emily swallowed hard. He's not my boyfriend. Oh, but the press says otherwise, and he's tearing the city apart for you. So tomorrow he'll sign over the Riverside project to me. In return, you go home in one piece. And if he doesn't? Emily asked, steadying her voice. The man's smile widened. Then you stay here. Forever. He left, the door slamming shut, plunging the room back into shadows. Emily's heart hammered, fear surging like a tidal wave. But amid the terror, one thought cut through. If Alexander signed, he would lose everything. If he didn't... A guard's phone buzzed. He switched on the speaker, shoving it toward her. Any last words for Mr. Cole? Emily drew a breath, forcing every ounce of courage into her voice. Alexander, listen to me. Don't sign. Don't trade everything for me. I trust you to find another way. For a heartbeat, silence. She thought the line had gone dead. Then his voice came, deep and steady, like a lifeline pulling her upright. Hold on. I'm coming. The guard snorted, cutting the call. But inside Emily, fear gave way to a spark of light, small but unyielding. Cole Holdings' office became a battlefield. The contract for the Riverside project lay on the table, waiting for a signature. Advisors crowded around, urging, It's just one project, Mr. Cole. Sign it. Get her back. Alexander sat unmoving. His gray eyes looked carved from ice, but beneath them churned a storm. He had lost deals before, sacrificed opportunities. However, Emily was not a deal to be bargained with. He remembered her words. I trust you. That trust wasn't something he would betray with ink on paper. No signature, he said, voice razor sharp. Ward wants to corner me? He'll see the consequences. Marcus nodded, his own eyes flashing with determination. We've narrowed it down to 4 warehouses near the docks. Vehicles are ready. Alexander rose, pulling on his long coat. Every movement was like a blade being unsheathed. Prepare. I'm going. Boss, let us... Marcus began. No. Alexander cut him off. Ward wants me, not you. And Emily, she's inside my circle. No one else touches it. Inside the warehouse, Emily sat against the wall, straining to hear the shuffle of footsteps outside. Her heart pounded wildly, a mix of terror and hope. Suddenly, the iron door burst open. Flashlights cut through the dark, accompanied by a sharp command. Drop your weapons. The snap of guns cocking echoed chaotically. Emily flinched, but then a figure surged forward, swift and decisive, as though even the air made way for him. Alexander. Time slowed. He disarmed one man with a twist, floored another with a single strike. Marcus and the security team stormed in behind him, clearing the room in minutes. When the chaos stilled, Alexander knelt and untied Emily's wrists. You actually came, she whispered, her voice trembling, eyes shining with tears. Did you think I'd let them keep you? His gray eyes burned like fire. No one has that right. She wanted to scold him for being reckless, to scream from the fear, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered, I told you not to sign. And I didn't, he answered, his warm hand closing over hers. Because I trust you. The way you trusted me. Emily felt tears rising, not from fear, but from the way her heart, knocked off course long ago, had suddenly found its path again. And that path, she knew, led straight toward the man in front of her. Outside, sirens wailed, red and blue lights flashing across the rain-slicked ground. In the space between wind, water, and racing breath, two worlds that once seemed irreconcilable touched in a silent vow. Nothing and no one could force them to let go. The wind howled across the docks, carrying the sting of salt, rust, and bone-cutting cold. The night was ripped apart by the floodlights from black vehicles surrounding the warehouse. Inside, between towering rows of wooden crates, came the sound of pounding footsteps, metal clashing, and ragged breathing, the rhythm of a battle. Alexander surged forward like an arrow loosed from its string. From the moment Emily had been bound in that dark room, he had no choice but to enter himself. Marcus and the security team secured the perimeter, but inside Alexander wanted to face Ward and his men directly. Cole! Ethan Ward's mocking laugh echoed off the cavernous walls. Of course, you couldn't let others fight for you. Still playing the hero, aren't you? Alexander didn't answer. His fist cracked against the nearest thug, sending the man's gun clattering to the ground. He pressed deeper, each step leaving bloody prints. His old wound, torn open again. Emily, tied to a chair, cried out, Alexander! Don't! Ward pressed a knife to her throat, eyes glittering with contempt. The contract, Cole. Sign it and I'll give her back. If not... Alexander stopped, breath coming heavy, but his voice was so cold it silenced the entire warehouse. You don't understand, Ward. There are things I can sell, and there are things I can throw away. But this woman, she's not on that list. Ward faltered, then sneered. This woman? She's just a nurse. Don't make me laugh. Precisely because she's ordinary, Alexander said, eyes locked on Emily. She's real. More real than everything you and I fight over out there. In the split second of Ward's distraction, Alexander lunged. The blade sliced across his arm, leaving a searing trail of blood. But he knocked the weapon free. The knife clanged across the floor. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, her heart plunging into darkness. Chaos erupted, blows landed, wood splintered, groans filled the air. Alexander fought like a cornered beast, pouring every ounce of strength into shielding Emily. He thought of no escape, no strategy, only of putting himself between her and every strike, every blade. At last, Ward hit the ground, blood trickling from his lip. Alexander staggered, one hand clamped to the wound in his abdomen, the other trembling as he tore away Emily's ropes. You're bleeding too much, Emily sobbed, pressing her palms to the gash, her hands flooding with crimson. Why do you always have to make yourself the shield? Do you think you're immortal? Alexander's lips twisted into a pained smile. Not immortal, but at least now I know I'm worth your worry. The words broke her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, soaking his collar. You idiot. If you die, then how am I supposed to go on? His shaking hand brushed her face, feather-light. Then you'll go on. Because you're stronger than you think. No, I don't want to be that strong. I just want you alive, Emily cried, clinging to him as if her grip could hold back the life draining from him. Outside, Marcus and the team burst in. Ward was dragged away in chains, but Emily barely saw. The world had blurred to the man collapsing against her shoulder. Get the boss out now, Marcus ordered. Two guards lifted Alexander, but he clung to Emily's hand, his fading eyes still glinting with strange pride. See, he whispered, I didn't sign a thing. I chose you. Emily bit down on her lip, choking on her own sobs. Stop talking. Save your strength. Rain lashed their faces as they stumbled from the warehouse, mingling with blood and tears. Emily held him tight, trying desperately to staunch the wound. Her heart pounded wildly, fear consuming everything. But through the sirens in the distance, the strobing red and blue lights, one truth echoed inside her. This man had risked everything, not for a project, not for power, but for her. And Emily's heart, despite the terror, despite the fury, had fallen out of step, forever bound to his from that moment on. The scream of an ambulance siren tore through the rainy night, its red and blue lights flickering across puddles in broken shards of color. Emily sat at the side of the stretcher, her small hands pressed desperately against Alexander's wound. Hot blood seeped through gauze, through her skin, burning every nerve in her body. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't get to fall asleep." "Look at me, Alexander." Gray eyes cracked open, fighting to find her face amid the chaos of sirens and rushing footsteps. In that gaze was the steel pride of a king, but beneath it, a rare fragility, as if she alone was allowed to see it. The emergency room blazed with sterile light, antiseptic cutting through everything. Doctors moved like shadows, voices sharp and urgent. "Pulse dropping. Prep the IV." Emily wasn't on duty tonight, but she refused to leave. "I'm a nurse. Let me help," she said quickly, and no one dared argue. Her hands trembled as she cut away the blood-soaked shirt, but her eyes burned with fierce resolve. When the doctor stitched the deep gash across his abdomen, Emily sat by his side, wiping sweat from his forehead. Every prick of the needle into his skin felt like it pierced straight into her own. "You're insane," she muttered, tears falling onto her gloves. "Always running headfirst, always the shield. Have you ever once thought, if you fall, how am I supposed to live?" Alexander tried to smile, a twisted curve in the middle of his pain. "At least, I know I'm worth your worry." The words again cut right through her. Emily wanted to shout, wanted to curse him, but her throat locked. All she could do was hold his hand, terrified it would lose its warmth. By midnight, the surgery was over. Alexander was moved to recovery. The doctor reassured her, "He's lucky. Serious, but not fatal. He just needs a few days." Emily stayed by his bed, carefully replacing the bandages, just as she had on the night they met. The warm yellow light softened his sharp features, making him look less like a tycoon, more like a man exhausted by battle. She whispered, "Do you remember? The first night I did this for you? You told me not to get involved. And now—" His gray eyes opened slowly, storm-swept but calm. He stared at her for a long moment before rasping, "I was wrong." Her heart stumbled. "Wrong? I could lose everything," he said, each word etched into the air. "But I can't lose you." The room fell silent, so quiet she could hear the heart monitor beeping steadily and sure. Each beat punctuated his vow. Tears spilled hot down her cheeks. Emily wanted to argue, to put distance back between them, but the truth swelling inside her was impossible to deny. She loved him. She had loved him from the moment he walked into the hospital bleeding, cold, impossible, and unforgettable. "Alexander," her voice cracked. He lifted a hand, slow and weak but unyielding, closing around hers. "I don't know how to love like a normal man. All I know is how to protect, how to shield, sometimes clumsy, sometimes too hard. But if you'll let me," his breath shuddered, "I want to learn. For you." Emily didn't answer with words. She bent down, tears wetting his cheek, and whispered, "Me too. I don't know when it happened, but I love you too." The distance between them closed. The kiss was soft, trembling, but real. Not a performance for the cameras, not a shield against enemies, but the truth of two hearts that had stopped lying to themselves. The hospital lights blurred. The rain outside still fell, but none of it mattered. Only the warmth of his lips, the rhythm of their hearts finding one beat, and an unspoken promise. From this moment, neither of them would face the storm alone. When their lips finally parted, Emily leaned her forehead against his, laughing softly through her tears. "Do you know? I hate your world, its danger, its shadows. But I can't hate you." Alexander exhaled. the corner of his mouth lifting. Good, because I have no intention of letting you leave it anymore. Beyond the glass, dawn broke. A pale new light spilled across the sky, carrying fragile hope. In that hospital room, amid wounds, blood, and fear, two people had finally found each other, through nothing but the truth in their hearts. And for the first time in years, Alexander Cole closed his eyes, allowing himself to sleep in peace. Because he knew when he opened them again, she would still be there. Weekend sunlight spilled gold across the windows of Emily's small apartment. She opened the window, letting in the cool breeze, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine from the nearby park. Today, she wanted to try something they had never truly had before. A normal day. No contracts, no bodyguards, no press conferences, she declared. Just us. Alexander looked at her, half surprised, half amused. And what will we do? Eat ice cream, go see a movie, then cook dinner. Like any other couple. The little ice cream shop down the street buzzed with laughter. Emily picked a vanilla bar coated in chocolate, while Alexander went for mint. The sight of a powerful Tycoon sitting on a plastic chair, carefully spooning ice cream, made Emily burst out laughing. When he spotted a smudge of ice cream on her nose, Alexander chuckled, then leaned down unexpectedly and wiped it away with his finger. You're so adorable. You make me forget how to breathe. Emily blushed, her heart racing, but she didn't argue. Instead, she playfully bit down on her spoon, letting his gaze linger on her, hotter than the summer sun. Inside the movie theater, the dim glow wrapped around them. On screen, the leading man stumbled through a confession, and for the first time in his life, Alexander leaned close and whispered, "Should I copy him?" Before Emily could answer, his hand found hers in the dark. Fingers laced, squeezing gently. Her heart pounded. When the screen flared bright, the light fell across his angled face. So close she could feel his breath. A clumsy brush of lips turned into a deeper, lingering kiss, hidden in the low hum of the audience's laughter. Emily leaned against his shoulder, realizing she had never felt so utterly belonging to someone as she did in that moment. That evening, Emily's small apartment rang with laughter as Alexander fumbled in the kitchen. He spilled water 3 times, chopped onions until his eyes watered red. Emily wiped the counter, teasing, the real estate king defeated by an onion. He slipped his arms around her waist from behind, his voice warm against her ear. I'm not defeated. I just needed an excuse to be this close. Emily froze, her body heating. His breath fanned the back of her neck, his hands steady on her hips. Suddenly, knives and cutting boards blurred into a backdrop for something else. Desire. She turned, lips brushing his. At first it was soft, tentative, but neither could hold back. Alexander pressed her gently against the counter, his hands sliding across her back, while Emily clutched his shirt. The kiss deepened, fierce and unrestrained, making up for all the restraint they had held until now. Dinner ended late. Candles burned low, leaving the room in a soft, golden haze. Emily tidied up while Alexander stood still, watching her, not as a man of power, but as a man consumed by want. You know, he murmured, stepping closer. All day I've been thinking about this moment. Before she could react, he bent down and swept her into his arms. Emily laughed in surprise, wrapping her arms around his neck. Alexander carried her toward the bedroom, each step deliberate, certain. The door closed. In that small room, a nurse and a Tycoon finally met as equals. Candlelight spilled in, illuminating touches, lingering kisses, whispered words between gasps. That night, they weren't the fake girlfriend and the powerful mogul. They were simply a man and a woman who had found each other after the storm. Distance dissolved, leaving only closeness, breath, and the rhythm of 2 hearts beating as one. The next morning, Emily woke in the circle of his arms, her hair spread across his chest. He was still asleep, his face unguarded, softer than she had ever seen. She traced his sharp features, now smoothed by rest, like something out of a dream. She smiled and whispered, "So this is what normal feels like, and it's perfect." Alexander stirred, his arm tightening around her. "For me, normal means you." And in that instant, Emily knew, no matter how violent the storms outside, they had found a rare peace within each other's embrace. The grand hall of the financial center glittered under chandeliers, crowded with black suits and elegant evening gowns. Reporters pressed together along the red carpet, cameras flashing nonstop. Everyone waited for the annual appearance of Alexander Cole, the most powerful real estate mogul in the city. But tonight, no one expected what he would bring. The doors opened. Alexander strode in, steady and commanding as always, his tailored suit flawless. But at his side, holding his hand tightly, was Emily Carter, in a simple pale blue dress, no sparkle, no extravagance. Whispers rippled instantly. "That's the nurse? I can't believe he brought her. A Tycoon and an ordinary nurse?" Emily's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, weighing, doubting. But Alexander's grip tightened around her hand, steadying her steps with strength that felt unshakable. He stopped in the center of the hall, the light falling across his sharp, calm face. When silence finally fell, his voice carried deep and clear. "This is Emily Carter, the only woman who belongs to me. And if anyone thinks they can touch her, they touch me." The air froze. Businessmen bowed their heads. None dared to laugh. Cameras flashed again, but not to search for scandal. They captured the moment when a king of finance openly bent his pride to love. Emily gazed at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. In that moment, she knew this was no act, no shield. This was love placed in the open, in the brightest light, no matter the cost. When Alexander brought Emily home to meet her parents, they were hesitant. They knew his reputation, the rumors of ruthlessness in his empire. Her mother clutched Emily's hand, whispering nervously, "My daughter, are you sure? His world is too dangerous." Alexander dropped to one knee before her, his voice steady as steel. "I will protect her with everything I have. If I ever break that promise, I accept the judgment of this family." Emily's father looked him in the eye. In those storm-gray eyes, he saw not only power, but a love so fierce a man would risk his life to shield it. At last he sighed and smiled. "Then, make my daughter happy." Emily's eyes brimmed as she embraced her parents. For the first time, she felt acceptance, not just from her family, but from fate itself. Their wedding was simple but warm, not a gilded ballroom, but a garden bathed in golden afternoon light. White and soft blue blossoms lined the path. Emily's colleagues, Alexander's trusted partners, and both families stood together to witness. Emily wore a light, flowing gown, her hair adorned with simple flowers. When she reached him, she looked up and saw not the cold mogul, but a man trembling with the weight of giving away his entire life. "Do you," the minister asked, "choose to walk beside him through storms and through peace?" "I do," Emily whispered, her voice shaking but firm. Alexander lowered his forehead to hers. "And I do. Even if I lose everything, I cannot lose you." Applause erupted. Confetti burst like fireworks. But in their world, only one thing existed, the long kiss sealed in cheers, a vow written forever. A few months later, morning sunlight spilled into their new home, not extravagant, but filled with warmth and laughter. In the kitchen, Emily wore an apron, carefully brewing coffee, the scent mingling with the softness of the day. From behind, warm arms wrapped around her waist, Alexander rested his chin on her shoulder, whispering into her ear, "The day you bandaged me." He paused, lips brushing her hair. "You bandaged my whole life." Emily shivered, half laughing, half moved. She turned to wrap her arms around his neck, eyes misting. "Then let me keep doing it. Because I'm not just your nurse. I'm your woman." Alexander smiled, a smile no longer cold but filled with peace. He bent down to kiss her, sweet as the morning coffee in her hands. Outside, the city roared on. But in that small kitchen, in the scent of coffee and the strength of their embrace, Alexander and Emily knew. They had found a power greater than all others, love. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family.